Ignition sequence start.
And we are live with the Primas in 5,
4,
3,
2,
1.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Primas podcast. I am the Prima Cindy B.
and I'm Prima Jess.
It'll just be the two of us today, everyone. And we are joined by a very special guest. Our special guest has a tremendous amount of experience in social work. He is a social worker after all. Shout out to Cal State LA where he got his master's in social work. Our special guest has a focus in early childhood development, teen groups, substance abuse, male engagement. He's a military vet, a father, a husband, a brother, a cousin, a tío, a primo, and he's my brother. Yay! He's my older brother, you guys. So I'm kind of nervous.
Hello, everyone. I gotta be honest. I thought your studio would be a little bit bigger, but glad to be here.
We're on the come up.
Yay, Robert. Thanks for being here.
Not a problem. Thank you guys for inviting me.
All right, cool. So you guys, this is a family affair right now. It's super family. I have both my brothers and my little sister. Jess is like my little sister at this point.
That is
We're
true.
still slowly merging into one person. So that's another dimension. But we'll get to that in another topic. So you guys, we wanted to talk about co-parenting. I feel like it's a new thing. I feel millennials are really stepping it up with coming up with even more vocabulary, even more terminology, even more words and titles and stuff. So as true millennials, we are going to talk about co-parenting because me and Jess are both co-parents and we wanted to share our experience. We wanted to talk about positive co-parenting because as you guys hear us say childhood trauma all the time, it's because whatever environment you have as a child really dictates how your behavior, reactions, fears are going to be as an adult, right? That's childhood trauma. And so some people have asked, and I think it's also important when people have been transparent about their situations in life, it's really helped me personally be more transparent because it's like, man, that really helped me. I wonder if my story might help someone else. So
Definitely. And when we were talking about this topic, Cindy and I were trying to figure out a different angle to mention it because co-parenting is a huge umbrella. So we just hope our message is out there about normalizing it. It just works for some people. So let's get this ball rolling.
Did our special guest want to say anything?
I think when we discuss the concept of co-parenting, I think it's really important that we kind of look at the construct of co-parenting and what it kind of entails. It's, not no manipulation between parents, no control of either the other parent or the child, and we don't expect an allegiance. So that's kind of what co-parenting encompasses, or that's what the expectation of it is. And it's an understanding by both parents that it's important for them to both have a healthy relationship all around with their children, and for them to feel that if your child shows affection to one parent or the other, that it isn't an alliance that's being formed. It's healthy, it's good, and it sets really good precedents for the child to feel that I can love both of my parents and there isn't an issue and that one of them is going to feel offended in any way. So that's co-parenting in its perfect form.
So I've been co-parenting. This is Prima Cindy, you guys. I've been co-parenting for almost 4 years now. I became a co-parent right before my daughter turned 1. So she's 4 now. So it's kind of going on 4 years. So it was something that ended up being a situation for me that I was super new to, and there was really nobody to go to. It was every situation is so unique. And like I say in every single episode we ever say is we're only talking about our very unique perspective in this. So, we don't speak for other co-parents. This is just stuff that's worked for us.
Yeah, so I'm on the same boat with Prima. Co-parenting was not an ideal situation, when I found out I was pregnant, but it is working for us now. We are going to talk about it. I do want to be transparent with our audience in the struggles. It's not an easy road. I've only been co-parenting for the last year, which has its challenges. And this is why we want to talk about it. We want people to be relatable to our topic, our situation, that it's not easy. There's no right way of co-parenting, but these are tools that we're using in hopes that help people get on the right track. Because at the end, you're going to hear after Cindy and I talk about a little bit more, our situation is better than where we started, and it does get better, but there takes time and work. So.
And that's pretty big of you to say, because the concept of co-parenting, really to be able to co-parent, it takes a real maturity on both parts to say, you know what, there's something bigger here than us being at battle with each other on nitpicking parenting styles, nitpicking every little thing. I think it's really important that we work on the self first to be able to address that, and then go into that. It creates a healthier co-parenting environment for the child.
Thank you for saying self, because that's literally what this conversation is going to be around. When I was thinking about this topic, I was like, okay, well, how can I put this information out there in a way that's still private, right? Because it's a private situation like this. I mean, that's my family, and just, it's private. But, still, how can I, I was trying to, I'm like, but it'll really be helpful if I do put myself out there. So the answer to all of everything that I've ever gone through always has started with with myself. And when I figured that out, that's when my co-parenting situation went from not too good to really good. I feel like I'm in a really good place, and it took us a while to get there, but now that we're there, it's beautiful, but you do got to put in some work, right? It's a business relationship that you didn't really know you needed to have. And the only thing in between is the children, right? So it's crazy. It teaches you a lot of patience, and it teaches you like let go of control. Otherwise, you're always going to be fighting. It teaches you unconditional love, because you also have to trust the universe and trust the other co-parent, regardless of how you guys ended. You have to separate that, and that takes a while, right? Like, that's real. That takes. Listen, we're just getting it together now, right? And I've been co-parenting since before my daughter was 1. And but saying that, I also want to say that I remember before I even became a parent, like when I was younger, and I would see other people trying to get into the co-parenting thing, or it was court ordered, and there was always drama. I don't think I ever saw like an example of a healthy co-parenting relationship. And so I always thought to myself, like, man, I don't ever want to be fighting. Like, if you're in a situation where you have a kid, like, that's it. Like, for me, like, the flag's up. Like, I surrender kind of to like the situation. Like, I'm not going to be mad. But it's hard, right? Because you have feelings, there's a lot of feelings that go into all of this, and there's emotions, and we're so emotional. Like, humans, we're so reactive and emotional. And, I don't know. I think, but anyway, like Robert was saying, it does. Once I started to check myself and make sure that I was in alignment with what I wanted, which was, and it was on my vision board, that I wanted to be a peaceful co-parent. And that's what you got to do. You got to start with a goal, and you got to live up to that goal every single day. And I just wanted to be a peaceful co-parent and respect. And I thought about that, and I spoke it, and I gave it, and I did a lot of compassion work and empathy, because there was times where I didn't want to, and I felt like it wasn't fair to. And when you get past that hurdle, when you get past your ego, it gets way better. I mean, I surrendered, I really did, because I couldn't take it. I can't ever in my life not have a healthy relationship with someone, like that. I don't know, that just like you're in a prison.
And you don't like, I don't necessarily want you to, or I don't think when co-parenting, you don't really want to look at it like I surrender, like I need to make this work. It's really about what's the purpose behind co-parenting. It's to be able to give the child a better emotional development, right? Like social emotional development, so that it becomes the best that it can be, and there isn't any attachment issue that comes out of it. And so when you look at, I want to be at peace with my child's parent, that's really where you want to go, is because that child's outcome is going to be a lot better emotionally if we're in a place where we can have healthy conversation, if we can respect each other. Because our children are going to come across situations where, you know, they're going to feel that resistance when they're growing up, and, you know, when they enter grade school, they're learning how to navigate, you know, friendships and relationships, sharing, things of that nature. And if these emotional developments are already in place as they go into grade school, they're going to have that much more success.
Yeah, Rob, and going back to my own experience and what you just said, as a kid, even though I grew up in a household where both my parents are together, they did not demonstrate healthy ways of parenting. They would always, I'm the oldest, so I think that's a oldest child syndrome where they bring me into their arguments. And that's one thing I told myself as a co-parenting moving forward, I never wanted to do. It takes time to break these habits, because even in my co-parenting situation, I saw habits that my parents did in front of me that I started to do with my partner. And that was a red flag. What Cindy said, I had to check myself. I was like, whoa, when did I become my parents, right? And it just goes back to psychology and our environment. Well, we grow up to thinking what is normal. And that was me. Even though I just started therapy, I think that's my first step in acknowledging and accepting and trying to move forward so my daughter doesn't grow up with as much trauma. And I know we use that word very loosely, but it is ultimately trauma if my parents are always arguing around us. That's not, you know, and Rob, I didn't realize, you know, after having my daughter, I talked to you a lot. I didn't realize your emphasis was child development or a lot of your expertise or your work environment. So you gave me a lot of advice. So what advice, if you can give someone just right now out of the gates of co-parenting, what would you say is like the one thing, if you could tell them, like old Cindy and Jess, what would you tell us?
Like, I mean, first disclaimer, right? Like, there are occasions when co-parenting is just not going to work. I mean, if there's abuse in the relationship, if there's domestic violence, if there's substance abuse. So we do have to understand there's times when, as a parent, we have to make the choice to put our children in an environment that's safe for them, right? So just wanted to put that out there first. There's just times when it doesn't work. However, that being said, I think the most important thing, and I've had this discussion with Cindy before, it's really looking at why. And you said it yourself right now, just you talk about how, you know, things were done, you know, when you were growing up, your parents were role modeling what it was to be parents. And so you saw these things, and you have to give credit to you being able to realize that, because many people don't realize some of the behaviors that they've inherited from their parents or from, you know, grandparents, or just growing up. And so that's really powerful for you to be able to recognize that. Many people don't realize that, and they go into the relationships and they wonder why we have failed relationships, why we struggle co-parenting, why we struggle, you know, having these relationships with our children. And really, most importantly, and it's really getting to know yourself. It's really about the self. The co-parenting will fall into place even if the other parent isn't where they need to be as a parent. If you were modeling good parenting skills to your child and ensuring that their safety is paramount, that's the most important thing, is really being able to do the work on your own. Because not only is the co-parenting going to affect the child, but your relationship with the child is going to affect the child. You know, we talk about it, I don't know if we're going to discuss this today, but we talk about attachments. You know, we have to look at what is our attachment, and how does that present itself in my relationships, not only with my life partners, but my children, right? So it's really get to know yourself, do your own homework, and don't be hard on yourself when you see, because you're basically, therapy is, you're kind of pulling at scabs, things you didn't want to talk about. And so being able to address those things in a healthy way is really appropriate, but also being able to do the work that comes with it. It's acceptance, you know, and what kind of work you're going to do. And so it's really the recommendation that I would do to the younger selves, period, myself as well, would be that, to really get to know myself. What are some of the things that I need to work on? Unfortunately, sometimes we realize those things halfway through our relationships. And so it's really not being so hard on yourself if, you know, the relationship didn't work, but it's really looking at ourselves. That's really the only person you can change. I don't know if that helped a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm learning that aspect. You can't control anyone. I feel like I need to get that tatted on my neck, because I feel like that phrase has been over and over in my head. I have to learn how to let go of that control, and I can't control anyone in all my relationships. My relationships with my parents, with my sisters, with family members, friends, and specifically my co-parenting partner. I have no control in what they do. So that's a good point.
And if you realize, just a little sidebar, if you realize that those buttons of yours that are being pushed are insignificant when you really pay attention to it, but we don't pay attention to why those things bother us. Where do they manifest? That, you know, if I'm annoyed by my parents or my partner or my siblings, where does that manifest? What part of my childhood was triggered so that is a button that's pushed and I just go off the deep end, right? And so things
And
like
I wanted to say, Jess mentioned that, you know, letting go of control. And that's something that even if you're not in a co-parenting relationship, even if you're in a relationship raising kids, even if anything, I was talking to my other brother about this last week. Anytime, and I heard this Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks. They're people that you like, motivational spiritual people that you can find on YouTube. And they said anytime that someone bothers us is because they're seeing life through their own eyes and perspective. So like anytime someone bothers you or an action of someone bothered you or whatever, it's always going back to because they did something that you wouldn't have done that way. So we're judging and it bothers us, and it goes back to control. Like it goes back to like, why does that person have to see things your way? It doesn't mean you're right or wrong. It doesn't mean they're right or wrong. It just means we're all looking at each other differently. And we were talking about normalizing disagreements, normalizing the fact that it's just so normal to disagree with people. So the fact that we clash so much from others from others thinking differently is because we need to check our ego. We need to let go. We need to like, oh my God, they have the right. Like, so, you know, if I can't judge my co-parent ever in their parenting style because that's who they are. That's just, you know what I'm saying? And like, if I want my daughter, the best for my daughter and for her to form a healthy, authentic relationship, it's helped that I don't get involved. And so I found this other term, speaking of millennial new terminology, it's called parallel co-parenting. And I think that's more of my style of co-parenting because it's, Robert mentioned this earlier, like if it's more like you can't get along, and I'm not saying that I can't get along with my co-parent, but you know, these relationships are like any relationships. We go in like a roller coaster. Like sometimes things are great, sometimes they're not, sometimes there's tension, and I'm still working on myself, right? So it helped us to just make it about parallel parenting. So it's different from co-parenting. I was reading in that co-parenting, the parents communicate a little bit more, you know, about like, oh, look, here's a picture, or look, this happened. And, you know, there's just a little more communication. Maybe like they do things together, or they, you know, they're more in each other's lives. They're like friends. Where parallel co-parenting is more like we're raising the child together, but separately, right? Like when my daughter's with her dad, it's her dad and that's their world. And I respect it and I don't cross boundaries, and that's her dad, right? Like that's her family. And when she's with me, I get the same in return, right? Like they, you know, her dad also like doesn't, you know, question my parenting, or obviously when things come up, we do talk about them, you know, school, the dentist, you know, there's just certain things that you just have to talk about. But other than that, and we do send pictures, like if I travel, I'll be conscious of the fact that, you know, my daughter won't be seeing her dad that week, and I want them to keep that connection. And so I want her family to know like what she's doing with her life when she's not with them, right? And so, and I get the same, but it's really limited. And I think sometimes that can probably work if you're trying to make it work as a co-parent and it's not working. Try to separate everything as much as possible. You disconnect from each other personally, and then you just, you know, understand that you got to respect each other. whether you agree with each other or not, it helps. And it, like, with time, maybe one day you guys can become like those co-parents who talk, you know? So I wanted to say that because I found that word and I was like, oh, that was new. I had never heard about that before. Parallel co-parenting. Yeah.
It is a new
Have
term.
you guys heard of that before?
No, I haven't.
I was studying a little bit about co-parenting or parenting, and I think the most important thing when it comes to, I mean, even parenting is hard when you have both parents in the picture, and you're trying to make things work. So it's not, it isn't like it's easy either way. I mean, you're putting two people in a room to try to coexist, and fortunately, we're not built with the same brain, so we have different ideals, different, we look at life in a different way. So that's bound to create some conflict in its own. But the most important thing that kind of came out of that for me when I was kind of doing a little bit more research on parallel parenting is this concept that I heard is, if you have a parent that shows up, that is unconditionally willing to cheer on that child, to be present, that's the most important thing. If you have a parent that is willing to be their biggest cheerleader, their biggest motivator, their biggest ally, that's what breeds, regardless of what the consequences were, regardless of the mistakes that we might make as parents, is if we show up every day in a positive way, then the outcomes are going to be pretty good for the child. It's really that. It's finding a positive role model, positive parent, hopefully, that can show up every day or most of the time to be that child's cheerleader.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because a lot of the time when when parents do get emotional, it's not even about the kids anymore, right? Like, we're just starting to use the kids to manipulate the situation. But it is all about the kids' well-being.
I agree. From my personal experience, Robert, everything you said, even though, Cindy, when you're talking about parallel parenting, right? It's not parallel co-parenting, parallel parenting. I'm not a fan of that. I really try to engage and have that relationship with my partner. As I mentioned earlier, we did not have the best start when we were off the gate from co-parenting, but now we are. Now we have that foundation where on days I don't have her, I can ask questions, because I too don't want to be like a hover parent or helicopter parent where I need to know everything my daughter's doing. I try to let go of that control, which I'm learning to do, but it still makes me feel good. And I want that communication and engagement from my partner. And I think he wants it as well. So we definitely are aiming towards co-parenting, not parallel parenting. But emotions
but I just want to say, I just want to say, it wasn't something that we wanted to do. It's something that we had to do. It's just, I was saying that because Robert was talking earlier about, sometimes you just can't co-parent. But if you're in the situation where you're like, well, we can, but we're still not seeing we're still involving ourselves personally, then we had to go that route. It wasn't something that I don't think anybody wanted. It was just an option where it's just like, well, parent-wise, we're still doing a really good job, but adult-wise, we're not. So we separated the having anything to do with each other personally. But this isn't something that, because you just said, like, you don't prefer that. This isn't something I think either of us prefer to do. It was a strategy that, out of love for our daughter, we decided, like, this is how we're gonna go about it. It's healthier that way. So I just wanted to say that.
That's great. And then I think this is why we're having this talk, because co-parenting, or whatever that term, it's an umbrella term, looks different for each two individuals. So I like how we're giving two different examples of what possibly co-parenting. And even so, I don't think neither of us fit the dictionary term of like what co-parenting is, because we're still in the process. We're still on the path. But yeah, you're right. It's a matter of whatever works for both of you. And ultimately that's going to benefit your kid.
Yeah. And can I bring something up real quick? I feel like this happens in a lot of relationships, whether they're in the co-parenting, parallel co-parenting, whatever all these other terms are. When someone breaks up with someone, if there's a child or children involved, and that someone starts to date someone else, things explode, right? Like you kind of like go back, people start fighting. I mean, emotions come up. And I think that's something that as a culture, we need to address because it's toxic. Like we're not in control of people. People can do whatever they want. And secondly, that has nothing to do with your child's emotional development. That has nothing to do with it. Like as much as you want to, well, I don't know who they're with. You know, people start saying, I just want to talk to them. I just want to have a conversation. No, you're trying to control it because what are you going to be there? You guys can have a conversation. You don't really know what's up with people until you live with them, right? Until you're really with them. So it's like, that's another piece of control that I think, is something that is super obvious. And it's just like, come on, that's messed up for the kids because that's between you guys.
Rob, in your experience and expertise, cuz, what advice can you give us in that situation? Like, how does one, or what does it do to the kids in that environment when mom and dad start dating someone else? How does it affect the kid, like in the longevity down the road?
Sometimes what happens, that's a really good question. Sometimes what happens is we try to protect the child from what we think is dangerous for them. They shouldn't be hearing this. We think we're doing the best that we can, but we protect them from hearing what the situation is. But children are really smart. One of the things that I got when I was, when my parents would have their discussions when I was growing up, it was, oh, they're little kids, they don't understand. And that's one thing that we have to be aware of. Children are very smart, a lot smarter than this generation, a lot smarter than the generation, when I was growing up. So these children are attuned to everything, vibration. I mean, like just learning about prenatal care. And when I would go with my wife to the doctor, and I would hear that, the children are in tune with their parents, the vibration of their voices. So when they come out, they're a little bit more alert with voices, and they recognize, but they don't know who they are, but they recognize voices. And so the discussion there would be to, in an appropriate way, obviously always find out what developmentally conversations are appropriate for a child, but always with as much respect as you can give the conversation. But it's really being able to talk to them. And I'm sorry that you went through that. That wasn't appropriate. These are discussions that your daddy and I are working on to so that we don't have these discussions, because it's not right. It's not appropriate for a child to be hearing two adults, having a strong discussion, screaming at each other, because a child is internalizing that. They don't, depending on their age, developmentally, they don't know how to vent that they're scared, that they're frustrated, anxiety. So these are all these feelings that are pent up in their bodies, and they have nowhere to go. So it's kind of like, shaking a soda bottle, and it's just becoming stiff, and the vent out can come in different ways. And it usually happens in school, where they lash out at a teacher or one of their classmates, or they become, really isolated. And it definitely affects their attachment with others. And again, that's another residual of them witnessing, verbal abuse, or parents having these discussions of, what's appropriate for our child or not. It's really, again, that's one of those discussions that if we're not going to respect each other, maybe then we're not going to be able to have these conversations in front of our child. That's not going to, it's really about setting boundaries and knowing how strong you are to set those boundaries. You're not disrespecting your child's father or mother, but you are setting boundaries of what is appropriate for them or not, because the breakup of the relationship doesn't continue to give the other person control of what you do, where you're at. It's, the welfare of our child is the most important thing, and that's where it stops.
And children are always going to learn what we do, not what we say, right? We've heard that before, where we can tell our kids whatever we want. They're going to really learn. Even the things that we do subconsciously, they're going to pick up on, and they're going to start to do them. And sometimes you see yourself in kids, right? When they say something at school that you're like, oh, snap, I didn't know they were listening, or I didn't know they had made that connection. And then they get older and wiser. And kids, I've seen it still to this age. My daughter's not there. I don't know. But they always learn to manipulate us as parents. That's a survival instinct. And we get better at it as humans, right? Like, that's the point. and well, to get better at surviving and manipulation. Like, you know, it's so easy for parents to manipulate kids because we do it without, you know, without even meaning to, but then they now learn to manipulate. When we say little small white lies to kids, well, I was telling this to my mom in the morning, like, we were talking about people who lie, right? As adults, people who lie, like, you just understand that, like, it's just a huge tendency of who they are, and they don't even realize really how they come off. And so my mom's like, I wonder where they learned that, you know? And I'm just like, they learn it at home. This is all childhood trauma, what we talk about. We learn these things at home. Every single, like, if you said a lie and that just so happened, like, I heard my parents say lie. And so, you know, say whether they were like huge or not, you know what I mean? Like, I heard them lie and then I learned to lie. And it just never went with me to lie. Like, it was too stressful to keep up with lies. And so I'm just like, I decided one day, like, F it. Like, I'm just going to be me. And if people like it, cool. And if they don't, cool too, right? Because you got to let go of control. And I literally stopped lying. Like, it makes me really uncomfortable. And I just see kids, you know, that you're just like, just tell the truth. Like, I know that you're lying right now. I don't know what lie is, but just chill. Just tell the truth. And they just can't because they've learned to lie because their parents lie to them. Or, you know what I mean? So, like, our kids, I mean, just generations are always going to be smarter, right? And we always learn to do this. And I think it's naive to think that they're not going to do it to us, you know? And so, yeah. So,
I think to kind of, I didn't really answer your question correct the way I wanted to, Jess, but I think the best thing to kind of reflect on what advice we can give ourselves is the advice you can give yourself. Look at your own childhood and look at the experience with your parents. Look at how they made you feel. Look at how some of the patterns that you learned from them, and you said that earlier, look at some of the patterns that you learned from them and how they manifested in your relationships going forward. So it's really look at that, and then you're like, so yourself as a child, as Melody's age, and then put put that on her now. Like, what must she be going through? These are some of the feelings I went through when my parents, you know, screamed in front of me, when my parents, you know, did whatever they did. And this is how I felt. So then you can kind of gauge how your child or children might be feeling in that moment.
Yeah, Robin, you're right. Because I remember sometimes how in tune my daughter is. And even though at a really young age, and I think that's a huge misconception because kids are so in tune. And when I realized that was with my own daughter, I was like play fighting with one of my sisters, and my daughter was crying, and she went like to my sister and like pushed her off like at one. And I'm like, yeah, so she's in tune.
Of course they know.
Yeah, and it just like blew my mind at that moment. And you know, we were jokingly, but imagine like when I would argue with her dad, or how she felt, like her two number ones in her life, her number one providers, caregivers, like talking to each other like that. So she felt it. And I'm glad you brought up that point about that misconception that kids just don't know anything, when I think they're very in tune with their environments, and they're sponges. They're just absorbing it. Okay, well, this is normal. Oh, mom and dad talk to each other like this. Oh, that's normal. And I wanna break that cycle with my daughter, and it's gonna take time.
Because it's true. We look at them, oh, they're little kids. No, they're little adults. They might not be able to express their feelings appropriately, but they have feelings just like you and I do. You know what I mean? They're just trying to figure it out.
When it feels good or bad. They know when something feels good or bad. Like, they're so yeah. And they're so
notice how the
flexible and
conversation,
open-minded.
And you notice how the conversation keeps going back to the child, and how the child, and they're, you know, everything, it kind of goes full circle back to our children. And it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. It's all really about what we want the outcome to be for the child. And if we truly want to invest in co-parenting or parallel parenting or parenting, it's really about being in tune with our children and what we want for them and how we're going to approach that, and really know about their emotions, and how sometimes some of the language that we use, we have the opportunity to filter it out. Oh, I said that, oh, I was being funny. They don't understand being passive aggressive. They don't understand people using, you know, loud aggressive language as a way of, oh, he's just being silly, or that's how they communicate. There isn't. It's just it doesn't feel good, and I don't know how to define it. And so that's the most dangerous stage for a child, because they're still trying to process that. They're still trying to define, what is it that I'm receiving? What is this communication between grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, that I don't understand? And so we sit in our corner and we just absorb all of it, unfiltered, 100% concentrated energy, whatever that was, whether it's positive or negative. And they don't have
And I
somebody.
also wanted to say, that it takes, in order for you to have, the environment ready for a child to grow up healthy, is by working a lot on yourself. For me, it's very important for my daughter to learn self-care and self-respect and self-love, and to be independent, and all of the good things that I got from my childhood. Because as much as we talk about childhood trauma, for example, me and my mom, we don't have a traditional relationship. But at the same time, I'm so happy that she made me the person that I am today. I'm extremely independent. I'm very happy by myself. I can figure it out, and that feels really good. It feels freeing as a woman, as a Latina. And I want to teach my daughter those things. And so how is she going to learn them? By seeing me meal prep every single day, by seeing me go to the gym, by seeing me work out, by seeing me, like, we go climbing, we go out into nature a lot, and I keep up with her. And I always want to do it. And you can, if you take care of your body. Um, and those things are so beautiful, because I get to grow with my daughter in all of her senses. We do co-parent. So that means that we have a schedule where we share. And so when I'm with her, all of my time and energy goes into that. But how can I show up ready for my daughter, who's very energetic, who's very, like, on the go, and I'm tired? I have to rest. I have to take my sleep very, very serious. And I have to eat well, because I need my energy to be top notch. And I need to work out, and I need to stretch, so that I'm not scared to climb a tree. Like, I want her to learn certain things that she needs help with. That means I need to get dirty. And it's been a beautiful experience. So I wanted to say that a lot of it also has to do with, if you show up beautiful and ready, and what I mean by that is by taking care of yourself and putting in time to yourself, then you're going to give that off. And that's what I want my daughter to learn. I want her to learn to take care of herself, because I believe that she's going to make her own decisions in life, and they're going to be great. I think children are so amazing. And if we just give them a nurturing, authentic environment, they're fine. They don't need us that much. We just, in the parts that they do need us, we're not there yet, right? Like, we're not emotionally and mentally there yet. But so for me, co-parenting, parallel co-parenting, when you live with someone, and I have so much empathy and respect for everybody, because parenting is so effing hard. And let me not get started on being a mom, regardless of your situation. Like, it's so hard. And Jess sent me a thing earlier, and I can't directly quote it, but it said something like, people say, oh, you guys are so great. How do you do it? And the moms are like, no, we're not. Like, we need help. And they're like, you're amazing. You guys are superwoman. It's like, no, we're not. Like, this is really hard. They're like, wow, your goals, you're this, you're that. And it's just like, it's so hard. And I just have one child, you guys, and I have my shit pretty together. And it takes so much for me to prepare. But that's what's helped me. I mean, I'm pretty disciplined at this point. I'm still working on it, but it's all because I had to become a mom, and it's been beautiful. So I also want to say that your child's outcome is going to be as best as you put time into yourself as well, because the rest comes very naturally. It's very beautiful. Like, we learn from life. It doesn't have to be that crazy. Like, we do it. Like,
I like our closing statements.
Yay, me too.
It's true. Children are resilient, just like we're resilient. They're going to be resilient. You're not going to damage them. Lord knows we tried. I'm kidding. You're not. It's children. As long as you show up, as long as you're present, because you don't know how many times I've gone to sleep and woken up wishing that I spend more quality time with my daughters. And I'm a decent parent. I mean, they haven't burned themselves. They haven't fallen off of, the roof or anything like
They haven't
that. I've
broken
always
a
caught
limb
them.
yet?
I've always caught them when they jump off the roof. It's kind of challenging them to go higher. But
Good for you.
they're resilient. Just give, especially women, give yourselves a break. You're doing a great job. You really are doing a great job, and know that your children are going to be that much better for it. It's just real pat in the back for parents in general. But I can speak for my wife. She, as much as I've wanted to say, no, it's 50-50. It's never going to be, not as, unless, science invents something where I'm starting to breastfeed or I start getting, morning sickness. It's just, there's a lot, there's an in tune factor with their children and moms that a dad can never replace. And that's not to say that we don't provide. There's a lot of enrichment that we can provide our children, in regards to getting them with regards to self-esteem, and maybe that's a topic we discuss in the future. But there are definitely things that females contribute to a child's development that males contribute. So it really isn't that one, does a better job than the other. It's just moms have always just kind of been showing up, and that's why a lot of my background is in male engagement, because we have a lot to offer as men, and it's time for us to start sharing that torch with women and really showing that. And we were asking for it. I mean, if you go to restrooms and restaurants and at public stores, not right now because of COVID, but you see a lot of changing tables where when I was growing up, my dad's restroom, the men's restroom, didn't have changing stations there. They didn't have these bikes for parents that were healthy so they can run with their children. It just wasn't something that we asked for. And that is definitely something that newer generations are advocating for. And it feels good to know that we're trying to share that responsibility, which it should have always been that way.
That's awesome, you guys. I feel
said,
good
well
about
said.
this topic. I feel that if anybody has specific questions, I know we kept it a little general, again, out of respect and privacy reasons, but I'm open book, especially with other women. If someone has a specific question, if you're struggling, if you're not even in a co-parenting relationship, whatever it is, please DM us. I'd be super happy to answer any questions. Again, with the purpose of a healthy relationship and outcome for our children, right? And for our societies and for the universe. Like, we need to spread love. We need to spread positivity. We need to have these conversations. And so if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about, I'm an open book. I'd be happy to share if it's going to help in any way. So yeah, if you haven't already, please follow us on Instagram at Primas Podcast. Follow us. Thank you so much to Robert, our special guest. Sorry,
Thank
Jessica.
you. Thank you guys for inviting me. It was really an awesome experience to kind of see your whole dog and pony show on the road. Really proud of both of you. Really proud of, and Melissa as well. But Eloy, the stuff that you've been doing with the podcast, editing it, it's out of control. But here we are, the Primas podcast. You guys are doing a great job. You're doing the Lord's work. Yes, you, Jessica. And proud of everyone. Proud of the discussion.
Jessica. All right. Well, you guys, that was a piece of the Barajas clan. We hope you enjoyed a conversation about positive co-parenting.
Bye. Bye, guys.